How can you crave silence and ache for connection at the same time? It doesn't make sense, not to the world, not to most people, maybe not even to you. They tell you to come out of your shell, but what if that shell is the only place you've ever felt real? You love your space, your quiet, your rhythm, and yet some nights, even in the calm you created, a strange ache stirs beneath the stillness. Not loud, not sharp, just restless. A pull towards something you can't quite name, not noise, not crowds, just something that understands the quiet as deeply as you do. You scroll through your phone, skipping the photos from that gathering you didn't attend. Not because you regret missing it, but because part of you hoped someone would text to say, "I wish you were there." You sit in a room full of conversation and smile at the right moments, but a thought hums under every laugh. They don't really see me. This is not loneliness in the usual sense. It's not about being physically alone. It's about feeling like a soul living one layer beneath the surface, while the world only sees what floats above. And still you've built your world carefully. The books that know you better than people, the music that speaks your language, the small rituals no one else sees. But peace can turn on you. You built the silence to save you, and now it echoes. You feel yourself reaching inward for comfort and finding too much space. That's the moment when your sanctuary becomes a question. Not am I okay being alone, but is anyone out there who would know what this feels like? Carl Jung, the Swiss psychologist who mapped the human psyche, once wrote, "Who looks outside dreams. Who looks inside awakens." You've done that. You've awakened. You've looked within long enough to know yourself, but not long enough to stop yearning for someone who sees what you see. This is the paradox. You want to be alone, and you want to be found. You want peace, but you don't want to disappear. You want someone to understand your silence without needing you to break it. So you live in the in-between. Not because you're broken, but because your ache is honest. It's not confusion. It's not indecision. It's a compass. And if you've ever stood in that space, then you've already felt the threshold. Not of isolation, but of a deeper self. The part of you that doesn't just crave solitude or connection, but dares to ask if there might be a place for both. There is a kind of beauty the world forgets to mention. It doesn't announce itself, it doesn't trend, it doesn't compete for attention. It is the beauty of the quiet. When the lights are low and the distractions fade, you return to the only space that never asks you to explain, yourself. For you, silence isn't a void to be filled. It's a presence to be felt. It's the air in the room after everyone has left, when you finally breathe like no one's watching. That moment you pour tea, light a candle, and exhale what the world never knew you were carrying. This isn't loneliness, this is sacred. Rainer Maria Rilke, the poet of inner solitude, once wrote, "We are solitary." How much better it is to recognize that we are alone. Yes, even to begin from this realization. You don't withdraw because you dislike people. You withdraw because here, in the hush, you can finally hear your own soul speak. In that silence, your mind clears. Your thoughts align. You become fully yourself again. You notice the shadows on the wall, the hum of the fridge, the way your heart slows when no one's expecting anything. This is your sanctuary, and yet even sanctuaries have doors. Doors that remain closed for protection, but sometimes you find yourself glancing toward them. There's a story few have heard, of an old hermit who lived alone on a mountain. After years of silence, a traveler found him and asked, "Why have you chosen this quiet life?" The hermit answered, "Because here I remembered how to hear God whisper." Then just before returning to his cave, he added, "But today I left the door open just in case he whispered through you." Solitude is not rejection, it's reverence. But even reverence longs for recognition. Sometimes you don't want the door kicked down, you just want someone to knock, not to rescue you, but to witness you. Because even a peaceful silence can start to feel like a locked room when no one ever asked to come in. You're not looking for noise, you're not looking for a crowd, you're looking for someone who can sit beside you in your quiet and make it feel shared. The paradox returns. You don't want to leave your stillness. You just want it to be understood. You want to remain in your sanctuary, but not in isolation. You want to be known, not loudly, but truly. And perhaps the most sacred moment of all is when someone steps into your quiet, sits without speaking, and somehow says everything. You've mastered being alone. You know how to disappear without anyone noticing, and that used to feel like power. But now you're not sure anyone remembers how to find you. The quiet you once called home begins to shift, subtly, slowly. It doesn't rage, it waits. You still do the same things, still light the same candle, still savor the stillness. But somewhere in that stillness, a different kind of silence creeps in. One that doesn't hold you, it haunts you. This isn't sadness, it's not a collapse. It's a question: have I made myself so self-sufficient that no one thinks I need them anymore? You walk through the same park alone, you sit on the same bench. The trees still speak in whispers, but you start to notice the absence, not of people necessarily, but of presence, of resonance. There's a story the mystics used to tell, about a bell that rang only when the wind passed through it at the right frequency. Not every wind, not any storm, only the one that matched its tone. It could go years without a sound, but when it rang, it was undeniable. You've become that bell, and the silence around you is not an emptiness. It's a waiting, a longing to be struck by something that understands your tone, and yet you begin to fear the wait might stretch forever, that your silence might outlast your voice. That maybe in protecting your peace you've also hidden your need. You've always chosen authenticity over performance, depth over attention. But now the question rises: will anyone ever hear me if I never raise my voice? Even in a room full of people, the ache is there. You speak, but it feels like translation. You laugh, but it feels like performance. You show up, but it feels like absence. You're broadcasting on a frequency no one else tunes into, and it's not that they don't care, they just don't know how to listen in your language. So you retreat again, not out of pride, out of quiet grief, because being misunderstood is lonelier than being alone. And being unseen while standing in plain sight is the sharpest kind of silence there is. But the paradox remains. You don't want to abandon your sanctuary. You just want to know that someone is out there who speaks the silence like a native tongue. Someone who won't just hear you, but resonate, not with noise, with recognition. Chapter 4. The longing to be seen without performing. You're not asking to be rescued. You're asking to be recognized, to be felt without being fixed, to be seen without having to perform first. You've spent years learning how to move through the world undetected, how to be pleasant, agreeable, useful without ever becoming too visible, how to speak just enough to seem fine, how to smile just enough to be left alone, and most of the time, it works. You pass, you function, you fit. But under it all, there's this question: what if no one ever meets the version of me I never perform? You want to be loved in the silences between sentences, in the gaze that lingers, not because it wants something, but because it recognizes something. Carl Jung wrote of the inner self as something we spend a lifetime uncovering, but what he didn't say is how much of that self stays hidden. Not by accident, but by exhaustion, because it's tiring, explaining a quiet soul in a loud world. And the longing grows. Not for company, not for attention, but for someone to sit in the quiet with you and not try to change a thing. There's a pattern you've seen again and again. You open the door just a little, someone steps in, bright, enthusiastic, alive, and they mean well, they mean everything good. But they mistake your quiet for emptiness. They mistake your space for lack, and they begin filling with advice, with laughter, with noise, and before long you're no longer in your sanctuary, you're in theirs. So you do the only thing that feels safe. You close the door again, not with bitterness, with sorrow, because the person you long to meet isn't the one who changes the room. It's the one who lets the room stay quiet. and sits with you there. Not everyone can do that. Most people listen only to reply. You're waiting for someone who listens to understand. Not the loudest voice in the room, but the one that says the most with their presence. That's not too much to ask, it's just rare. But if they find you, you'll know. Because they won't ask you to speak, they'll sit in the silence. And finally you'll hear your own voice more clearly than ever before. Chapter 3. The Paradox as a Path. You've spent so much of your life caught between two longings, to be alone and to belong, to protect your stillness and to share your soul. You've tried choosing one over the other, tried committing fully to solitude only to feel the slow ache of invisibility, tried opening your heart to connection only to feel your spirit scattered in the noise. But what if the choice was never the point? What if the paradox itself is sacred? We're taught to see contradictions as problems, to solve them, fix them, resolve the tension. But some tensions aren't there to be eliminated, they're there to be lived. This is not confusion, this is complexity. This is what it means to carry depth. You are not indecisive, you are not emotionally unclear, you are multidimensional. And your paradox is not a glitch, it's a guide. There's a parable few remember, told in fragments through different traditions. A lantern sits in a tower high above the sea. Each night it shines outward, casting its light for ships in the dark. But what no one sees is this: the flame only survives because someone returns each morning to tend it in silence with care far from view. You are both the light that reaches outward and the keeper of the flame. Solitude is the tending, connection is the radiance, and both are needed to keep the truth alive. We often speak of belonging as something found in others. But perhaps true belonging begins in the place where you stop apologizing for needing both space and closeness, for wanting to be seen but not invaded, for needing distance but not indifference. When you accept the paradox, you stop waiting for someone to give you permission to be whole. You stop measuring your peace against other people's expectations. You stop asking if you're too much or not enough. You start walking a third path, the one that honors both your silence and your ache. And slowly something shifts. You no longer chase connection from a place of lack. You begin to offer your presence from a place of fullness. Not everyone will understand this. Some will call it inconsistency. Others will mistake it for emotional distance. Let them, because you've touched something deeper now. You've seen that the paradox isn't there to be conquered. It's there to be carried, and in that carrying you become whole. Chapter 6. The belonging within and the invitation forward. What does it mean to belong, not just to a group, not to a tribe, a role, a place in someone else's story, but to yourself, fully, quietly, without compromise? We grow up thinking belonging is something we earn, by speaking louder, by fitting in, by proving we're worth the space we take up. But you know better now. You've felt the fatigue of performance. You've lived the ache of invisibility, and you've walked the long, quiet road back to yourself. Belonging, real belonging, doesn't begin when someone else chooses you. It begins when you stop abandoning yourself in the name of being chosen. It begins when you learn to sit in your own silence and recognize it as holy, when you stop seeing your depth as a burden, your quiet as a flaw, your boundaries as walls, because they're not. They are invitations, sacred thresholds, and the people meant for you will recognize them as such. You don't have to shout to be heard. You don't have to shrink to be loved. You don't have to explain your quiet to people who only understand volume. You belong to the ones who see the light in your stillness, who don't just tolerate your silence, but feel at home in it. And if you haven't found them yet, don't panic, don't compromise, don't collapse into noise. Wait, tend your flame. Let your light shine in the way only you know how. Because when someone finally arrives who speaks your language, not just your words, but your pause, not just your gestures, but your absence, you'll feel it. You won't need to prove a thing, you'll simply exhale. And know that the paradox you've carried all this time wasn't a burden, it was a beacon. If you've felt that ache, if you've lived between the need for solitude and the longing to be seen, you are not alone. You are not broken. You're not lost. You're already home. You just needed someone to whisper back through the silence, "Me too."